Hey everyone, my name is McKenna, also known as Sylphic Studios, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And today I am back with another custom doll video. You guys probably could have guessed that already though. And since you clicked on this video, you probably already know who we'll be making today, but we'll be making, drumroll please, Rogue from X-Men Evolution. Now you guys are probably gonna kill me. I've never seen X-Men Evolution or literally anything Marvel. I've just never really been into. After making this doll, I definitely want to watch Evolution at least though. It looks super cool. But yeah, I haven't seen the show myself, but I was commissioned to make her by my lovely commissioner, so today we'll be making her. So without further ado, let's get into the customizing, starting with prepping. So to make Rogue, I decided to combine two different base dolls together. I decided to use Spectra because she's a pretty good universal body, and she's on a taller, more curvy body type. And then for her face sculpt, I chose G3 Frankie because I feel like their face shapes are pretty similar if you put them side by side. So yeah, I'll be mashing these two dolls together today. But first things first, we have to de-scalp both of them and cut off all of their hair, but I'm only going to be showing you guys Frankie because if I show you both, that'll just be a little bit repetitive. So yeah, I'm just taking my super tiny pair of scissors and cutting off all of their hair starting at the root, and then I'm just working my way inward. I always like to chop the hair literally as close to the scalp as possible because I feel like it makes it easier to remove later. So I like to chop everything as short as I can and then clean everything up with a fan brush afterward just because there will be a lot of little hairs everywhere. This is what Frankie was looking like with all of their hair chopped off. So now it's time to get into the doll torture portion of the video, which is drowning them in boiling water to soften up their head. I let Frankie sit in there for about a minute or two to get it all softened, and then I started pulling everything off with a towel. I was having some trouble with this head, so I did go in with my bare hand, but this was after it kind of cooled down a little bit. But after I removed their head, I went in with my super long needle nose pliers and just started scraping the crap out of the inside of their head to get all of those old plugs out. Depending on the doll itself and the type of hair fiber that the doll has, this can be either super tedious or super easy. This head was a little bit easier than some others, but removing all of the hair from the inside of the head is the more tedious part because you have to go in and manually pick up every single one like this. So it does take a while, but this is what Frankie was looking like completely bald, and now it's time to get into the next step, which is the body repainting. So now we'll be switching dolls, and now I'm working on Spectra's body, so of course to prep everything for the paint, I am going in with my sanding block and just sanding everything down a little bit. This just helps with the durability of the paint, just so that, nothing would happen to it if anything were to hit it or if it were to fall or anything like that. And I believe I'm using 400 grit sandpaper. I could probably honestly go up a little bit just to make sure that everything's a little bit more smooth, but this grit works perfectly fine for me. This is what everything was looking like after she was all sanded. I did go ahead and wash off all of the dust and everything just to make sure that I didn't have any dust in my paint and my primer whenever I primed her. But yeah, I just went ahead and sprayed her with my primers outside, and then after those dried, I'm just going in with my watered down satin finish acrylic paint and painting her skin tone in a lot of thin layers. I honestly don't record every single layer that I paint because it would get pretty repetitive. So yeah, this was her with one layer, and then this is her after all the layers and after she had already been sealed. And now I'm just taking my pan pastels and just packing them in layers on all of her joints and all the areas that I couldn't really paint that well. This is actually a new step for me as of this commission batch because I want to up the quality of my dolls even more. And I'm honestly really loving this step. It just really reinforces the paint around the joints and kind of helps with chipping. It fully doesn't stop chipping because that's kind of inevitable, but it does help keep a layer of color over their joints if anything were to chip, if that makes any sense at all. The powder is just way thinner than layers of paint, so the chances of it getting scratched off are lower, if that makes sense. So after I did that with the pan pastel, now I'm going in and actually body blushing her with a pinkish purple pastel. This just helps bring a lot of life into the doll because, you painted it an entire flat color, so it just helps bring some life into it. So yeah, this is what her body repaint was looking like all done, so now it's time to move on to her reroot. So of course before I reroot her, I have to paint her scalp to match her hair. So I'm just taking this acrylic paint right out of the cap and just painting it all over her scalp. This usually takes 2 or 3 layers of paint and doesn't take too much, just enough to make the paint pretty opaque, if that makes sense. This is what her head was looking like after 1 layer of paint. I did go ahead and just do 2 or 3 more off camera. So now it's time to move on to her actual reroot. So this is the hair that I chose to use. It's the color Anato from Shimmerlocks and their nylon hair. And I actually forgot to show you guys the white that I used for her bangs. I'll have to put a picture of it up on the screen right now. So whatever that is, that will be on the screen for you guys. But yeah, I'm just going to be rerooting this entire head in this maroon color until I get to her hairline and her bangs, and that's where I'll start, rerooting the white. But yeah, I know this is framed awfully. I probably chose the worst angle ever to record this. But I'm basically just taking a super tiny piece of the hair and just sticking it into the head on my rerooting needle and just slowly marking my way around. And rerooting a full head of hair like this usually takes around like 7 or 8 hours, I'd say. It takes like a pretty long time. So it's definitely not for the weak. But anyway, this is what she was looking like when her hair was fully rerooted. I wasn't entirely sure what the best way to reroot her bangs would be, so I just ended up just sticking some of the white hair like into her hairline over the maroon so it kind of like blended together, if that makes sense. So now after all of her hair was stuck in her head, now I'm just taking some Fabri-Tac glue and just gluing all of the hair in there. And I always like to put way more than I think I'll need just to be more safe so that I don't have any hairs pulling out later. And then I just swirl it around with a Q-tip to make sure that I'm getting all of the hair plugs. I let that dry overnight, and then the next day I did boil wash her off camera and then shampooed and conditioned her hair just to make sure it was super soft and shiny. And now I'm just cutting it to a more manageable length because like having the full length of hair after a reroot is kind of just not super easy to handle a lot of the time, so I'm just cutting it. I cut her hair to, her bob length later, but for now it's staying at this like mid-length just to make it more easy to work with. And this part is super unnecessary, but because the blunt cut was bothering me, I just went ahead and like started point cutting it a little bit just to make it look a little better. I did cut it later to her bob length, but yeah, this was unnecessary, but I wanted to do it anyway. This is what her hair length was looking like after I cut it, so now we're going to be putting it up into her little like extra fabric hair cover thing. I don't know what to call this, but I'm basically just taking a piece of scrap fabric and just attaching it to her head to cover up her hair to protect it from the sealant and everything while I do her face up. So with that being said, I think she's finally ready for her face now, so let's move on to her face up. So before we can actually start working on her face up, we need to remove Frankie's factory paint, so I'm just taking some 100% acetone on a little Q-tip and just rubbing it all over their face. You can use like those little cotton rounds for this too. I just prefer to use Q-tips because I can get into like the little like crevices in the sculpt, if that makes sense. I always make sure to get like literally all the factory paint off just to make everything as even as possible, so this is what they were looking like with all the factory paint removed. I believe this is actually like only the second time that I've used a Frankie sculpt for one of my custom dolls before. The other one was for one of my commissioner's OCs. That one was super fun to work on. So I was of course super excited to work on Frankie again. I love getting to work on different sculpts. It's just super fun as a doll artist. So yeah, now I'm just painting the skin tone to be even with her body. And before I did this, I went outside and sprayed her with my white primer to make her skin tone more in line with how Spectra's was before I painted her, to make sure that all the undertones were the same. This of course took a lot of layers too that I didn't record, so it will just fully cut to me blushing her face now. And to do this, I just took the same like purpley pinkish colors from my pastel palette that you see in the background there and just kind of brushed it on her face. It's super subtle, but I promise it adds something. But now we can finally move on to the fun part, which is her face up, and you guys are probably going to be upset. I don't have too much footage from this, as I always do, because my big fat head always covers like the entire camera because I'm so close to her face when I'm doing this. But I tried to salvage as much as I could, and a lot of it is just me blending and just going in and adding highlights to her eyeshadow. So this is like layer 1 of the face up after I sealed in the sketch layer, so I'm just going in and building up the colors pretty slowly, and the majority of this face up was literally me just sitting here and blending it back and forth to make sure everything was super smooth. So it's just a lot of back and forth circle motions with my pastels here. But after I was happy with how her eyeshadow was blended and everything, I went in with my dark colored pencils like my black to darken up her eyes and her eyebrows and everything, and then I went in and deepened her lips as well with my dark bluish purple. This is layer number 2 done, so now I went outside and sprayed her with Mr. Super Clear again, and now we're on to layer 3, which is just further defining everything and adding details. And this is her finished face up. I'm honestly in love with how it turned out. I haven't done a super dark eyeshadow look like this in like a really long time, if not ever, so I was super excited to do this and I'm really happy with how it turned out. So now that that's done, I can finally remove her hair cover and free her hair, and now I'm just taking my nail and scratching off all of the sealant from like her entire hairline. And I actually get a lot of questions on my TikTok and Instagram as to why I do my face repaints and my face ups after I reroot the hair as opposed to doing it the other way. And that's because rerooting puts a lot of pressure on the head and you're constantly like squishing it and stuff, and if the skin's repainted, that can just cause the paint to crack, and that's like the worst case scenario. You don't want that to happen. So it's just generally safer to repaint afterwards just to avoid that risk. I hope that makes sense. I know it probably seems like counterintuitive and annoying to have to scratch off the sealant off like the hairline afterward, but it's just safer. So yeah, that is why I do it that way. But anyway, as a final touch, now I'm just adding some Liquitex High Gloss Varnish to her lips and her eyes. And this is her finished face up. So now that that's done, let's move on to the last and final part, which is her outfit. So for the first part of this outfit, I couldn't really record that much because I was dog sitting at my boyfriend's house and I forgot my tripod, so I kind of had to make do with what I had. So this is me just showing you guys me putting her leggings together. Like this is one leg sewed up, and then this is me sewing up the other one, and then this is what they looked like all done. And since I was away and didn't want to risk like ruining the rogue doll that I was working on, I did bring a Spectra body like duplicate over so I could size everything properly. But yeah, these are her leggings, and then this is the skirt. I patterned it out myself, kind of just eyeballing it, honestly. This is before I hemmed it. And then this is her little tank top before I added the straps. And this next part is when I actually got my tripod brought to me so I could record stuff. So thank you, Mom, for bringing my tripod to me. But anyway, this is just me cutting out my pattern pieces for her green mesh shirt. And the pattern I'm using for this and her leggings actually are both from Delightful, so I will link those in the description if you guys are interested. I'd highly recommend checking them out. Delightful has some of like the best patterns ever, and they're like sized for different generation bodies and all of that stuff, so I highly recommend checking them out if you're interested in making doll clothes. But yeah, I just found this like green shirt with the perfect colored like green mesh at the thrift store, so I picked that up and then started cutting out my pattern pieces from it, and now I'm just fray checking it because I definitely don't want this fabric to fray. And if you guys have ever wondered like where I get the majority of my fabric for my dolls, I actually thrift like probably 99% of it. It's so much fun to just go to a thrift store and kind of like scavenger hunt for the different fabrics that you need. It's like my favorite thing ever. So yeah, I'd recommend going to your local thrift store and trying to find clothes that you can upcycle into new little smaller clothes. You know what I mean? But yeah, anyway, switching gears, I guess I'll kind of explain what I'm doing here in the background. So first I sewed the front and back panels together, and now I'm sewing these sleeves together. For like clothing pieces like shirts and for like small kind of detailed sewing like this, I always prefer to hand sew. It's just super hard to get a machine in there to do this sometimes, and my machine likes to eat my fabric a lot of the time, so it's just easier to hand sew. So this is what the shirt was looking like before I sewed everything up the sides and hemmed everything. So now I'm just taking my Fabri-Tac glue and I'm trying to be kind of light with it to avoid any glue marks, and I'm hemming all of like the bottoms and stuff like that and the neckline. And fun fact, I actually made this shirt twice because the first one that I made like actually had like glue marks from me hemming it because I used too much glue and it was bothering the crap out of me. So I wanted to remake it to make sure that it was better quality. So the shirt that you're watching me make right now is actually the second and final one because I just wasn't happy with the first one. You can kind of see it in the background there. But now that her shirt's done, it's time to move on to her trench coat, and I'm just using the previous like shirt pattern that I used for her as like a baseline to make sure it fits. Then I'm kind of just like extending it in like a trench coat shape so that I can pattern that out. And another fun fact, I actually made this trench coat twice too because I just wasn't happy with the first one because I tried doing like a more traditional trench coat style like neckline. I just wasn't happy with how it turned out, so I remade another one and this one turned out so much better. I love how this one turned out. But yeah, the process of making this was basically the same exact thing as making the shirt, so I won't show you guys every single step again. But yeah, this was one side sewed up, and then I sewed up the other one, pressed the seams, and then this is how the trench coat turned out. It like is wanting to lay super flat open for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. But yeah, this is the final coat. I love how it turned out. So now we're finally moving on to her boots, and I actually used G3 Frankie's boots for this because they're literally like the perfect sculpt. Like they have the little horizontal lines and everything. So I was like, yep, I am using these immediately as I saw them. And they were already black, but I did paint them more black just in case. I don't really know why I did that, to be honest. And then to kind of break up the boot a little bit, I painted the like top part of the boot with a glossy Mod Podge, and then I painted the bottom part with a matte Mod Podge so that it kind of like breaks up the shades of black, if that makes sense. And this part was super hard to record because, again, my big fat head was in the frame, but these are her little like studded bracelets and necklace. I think they turned out so cute. And then this is a little overview of all of the pieces that I made for her, minus the coat because this was the previous one that I had shown at this point before I remade it. So yeah, disregard that coat, that one isn't the final one. But now that all of her clothes are finished, I think it's time to finally get her dressed up for her reveal. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this week's YouTube video. And a huge thank you to my commissioner who actually requested I make her further partner, so thank you guys so much for requesting her. I hope you guys love her as much as I do. She was so much fun to put together, and I'd totally be down to make more like X-Men Marvel characters in the future, so if you guys would ever want to commission one, I do have a waitlist which will be linked below in my link tree. But yeah, I actually will have another video out next week, which is pretty rare. I've been kind of few and far between with uploads lately. But that's just because I'm working hard on my commissions, guys. I'm working at all times of the day. And this one will be more of like a simple restyle rather than a full custom because I was commissioned by one of my mutuals for a face-up commission and I wanted to save it for Chinese New Year because I thought she would be super fitting. So you guys will be seeing her next week. So yeah, I hope you guys are excited for that. I know I am. But yeah, I don't think I have any other like announcements or anything important to say before I get into my little Patreon spiel, so I think it's time for me to go ahead and do that. So if you'd like early access to YouTube videos just like this one, early access to my future dolls, and other benefits, I highly recommend checking out my Patreon. I do offer a free tier as well as my paid one, so if you guys are interested, I will leave the link below. And usually at this point in the video, I would name off all of my Patreon members, but honestly, my list is getting a little bit long now, and I don't want to be sitting here for too long naming off everyone, so I think I will just be naming my paid patrons going forward. So with that being said, thank you so much to Pumpkin Tushy, Allie, Neil, and Jizer for supporting me on my paid Patreon tiers. I love you guys so much. Thank you. And a huge thank you to Danae, Lane Trombley, and Ty for joining my Patreon since my last video. Thank you guys so much. Big W's in the chat for you guys. But yeah, if you like this video, I also have an Instagram and a TikTok that I am fairly active on, so I highly recommend checking me out over there. I'll leave the links to both in the description as well. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you guys are having a good morning, evening, night, or whatever it is wherever you are. And I'll see you guys in the next video.